There's a moment during every traffic stop where most drivers feel like they've lost control, even if nothing serious has happened yet. The lights come on, your heart rate goes up, you pull over, and suddenly, you're in a situation where every move feels like it matters more than it should. But here's what most people don't realize. It's not just about what the officer can do, it's about what the law allows them to do. In every single stop, whether you understand it or not. And in 2026, with stricter enforcement, better training, and more technology involved, that gap between what drivers think is happening and what's actually happening is bigger than ever. So, let me ask you something honestly. If you were pulled over right now, would you know exactly what an officer is legally allowed to do during that stop? And more importantly, what you can say to protect yourself without making things worse? Drop your answer in the comments, because most people are guessing. And guessing is where mistakes happen. Now stay with me, because what I'm about to explain is not about fear, and it's definitely not about fighting the system. It's about understanding it clearly enough that you don't accidentally work against yourself, because there are things officers can legally do at every traffic stop. And there are a few simple words used at the right moment that can protect you in ways most drivers never think about. Let's break this down step by step. The first thing you need to understand is that once you are lawfully stopped, the officer already has a legal foundation to control certain parts of the situation. They don't need your permission to approach your vehicle. They don't need your approval to ask for your license, registration, and proof of insurance. That's standard. But here's where people get confused. They think everything that follows is also mandatory. It's not. There's a line, and most drivers don't see it. Now let's talk about something officers can legally do in almost every stop. And this surprises people when they hear it. They can order you out of the vehicle. No long explanation required in that moment. No debate on the roadside. If an officer tells you to step out, you comply. But this is where awareness matters. Because while you comply with the order, you don't lose your awareness of what's happening. Before you move, before you open that door, you pause just enough to stay in control. And you say something simple. Officer, am I being detained or am I free to go? Now, listen carefully. This is not about refusing the order. It's about understanding your status. Because once you know whether you're being detained, everything else becomes clearer. If you are being detained, then the stop is still active and you proceed carefully. If you are free to go, then the interaction should end, and that clarity is powerful. Now let's go deeper. Another thing officers can legally do during a traffic stop is ask questions, a lot of them. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Have you had anything to drink? Who owns the vehicle? And here's the part that most people misunderstand. You are not always required to answer these questions. Providing identification, required. Answering investigative questions, often optional. But people don't know where that line is, so they just keep talking. And that's where problems begin, because every extra answer is more information. And more information can lead to more questions. And more questions can extend the stop. So instead of filling the silence, instead of trying to help, you can say something calm and clear. I'd prefer not to answer any questions. No attitude, no tension, just a boundary. And that boundary keeps the interaction focused on the original reason for the stop. Now let's talk about something that happens all the time, and most drivers don't even realize it's happening. The officer asks for consent to search your vehicle. Do you mind if I take a look inside? It sounds casual, almost like a formality, but it's not, because if you say yes, you've just given permission. And once you give that permission, you can't control what happens next. So this is where your words matter again. You don't argue, you don't accuse, you simply say, I do not consent to any searches. Clear, calm, direct. Now here's something important. This does not stop a search if the officer has legal grounds, but it prevents you from giving away your rights voluntarily, and that matters later, more than you think. Now let's move into something that changed how traffic stops are handled in recent years and continues to evolve in 2026. Observation. Officers are trained to observe everything. Your tone, your movements, your timing. how quickly you respond, how steady your hands are, how you react to questions, and here's the key detail. They're not just looking for illegal behavior, they're looking for inconsistencies, because inconsistencies lead to more questions. So when you understand that, you start to move differently. You slow down your actions, you keep your hands visible, you avoid sudden movements, you speak clearly, and only when necessary. Because now you're not just reacting, you're aware of how you're being perceived. Now let's talk about one of the biggest misunderstandings people have. They think the goal during a traffic stop is to explain everything. They think if they just talk enough, they can fix the situation. But here's the reality. The roadside is not where your case is decided. It's not where arguments are resolved. It's where information is collected. And the more information you give, the more there is to interpret. So the goal is not to win the conversation. The goal is to get through the interaction cleanly. Now let's bring everything together in a real scenario. You're driving. You get pulled over. You pull over safely, turn off the engine, and keep your hands visible. The officer approaches. Do you know why I stopped you? Instead of guessing, you stay neutral. I'm not sure, officer. They ask for your documents. You provide them calmly. No extra talking. They ask where you're coming from. You respond, I'd prefer not to answer any questions. The tone stays calm. No tension. Now the officer has less to work with. The stop stays focused. At some point, you ask, am I free to go? If the answer is yes, you leave. If the answer is no, you understand the stop is still active. If they ask to search your vehicle, I do not consent to any searches. Now everything stays within its proper limits. No unnecessary expansion, no accidental mistakes. And in many cases, the stop ends faster. Not because you forced it to, but because you didn't give it room to grow. Now here's the part I want you to really understand. These words are not about being difficult. They're not about challenging authority. They're about clarity. Because clarity removes confusion. And confusion is where most problems begin. When you don't know your status, you guess. When you guess, you talk. When you talk, you risk saying something that changes the situation. But when you stay clear, calm, and aware, you don't fall into that pattern. You stay in control of yourself. And that's what matters. Because at the end of the day, officers can legally do a lot during a traffic stop. More than most people realize. But what they can't do is force you to create problems for yourself. That part comes from you. And once you understand that, you stop making the small mistakes that lead to bigger consequences. You don't panic. You don't over-explain. You don't give away control without realizing it. You simply handle the situation correctly. And that, more than anything else, is what protects you when those lights turn on behind you.